The diaper bag hit the asphalt before the words did. A young woman in a thin gray coat shoved a bundle into the arms of the biggest man outside the roadhouse, said please in a voice that cracked down the middle, and ran for the dark line of trees at the edge of the lot. The man stood frozen under the buzzing sign in his arms against 400 pounds of denim and leather, and stillness. A baby blinked up at the orange light and did not cry. His name was Del Brunner, and he had ridden with the Iron Verdict Motorcycle Club for 19 years. He had carried wounded men off mountain roads. He had stood at 6 funerals. He had never once in his life held something this small. The bundle weighed almost nothing. The weight, he felt, was different, and it landed in his chest like a dropped anchor, and it did not lift. He looked at the trees. He looked at the road. He looked down at the face, wrapped in a yellow blanket, and the face yawned. A car was already gone. He had heard it, somewhere under the music, a worn engine turning over hard and then fading north on the county road. He had not seen which one. The woman in the gray coat had not waited to be argued with. She had chosen him out of the whole lot, the largest and most frightening shape she could find, and she had handed him the only thing she had and trusted that a man who looked like the end of the world would not let it fall. That was the part Del could not get past, not the running, the choosing. The roadhouse behind him was called the Ace High, a low cinder block building on the edge of a town called Harlan Cross, with a gravel lot and a row of bikes lined up under a sodium lamp and a screen door that never quite shut. Inside, a jukebox was playing something slow. Out here, there was only Del, and the cold, and a child. He moved before he decided to. That was 19 years of instinct talking. He turned, careful as a man carrying nitroglycerin, and pushed through the screen door sideways, so nothing bumped the frame. The noise of the place wrapped around him, and then fell off a cliff. One by one, the men at the bar turned. The bartender stopped pouring. A woman at the pool table set her cue down without a sound. They all looked at the same thing. The bundle of yellow against Del's chest, and the silence that swept through the room was immediate and suffocating. At the head of the long scarred table near the back sat a man they called Padre. His real name was almost forgotten. He was past 60, heavy-set, with a full gray beard and forearms inked from wrist to elbow, and on the back of his cut were the words that meant he had the final word on everything that happened under the club's name. He did not stand. He looked at the baby, then at Del, and his voice came out low and even, a gravel rumble that filled the room without rising. "Whose?" Padre said. "A woman put it in my arms and ran," Del said. "Out front. Maybe a minute ago. Ran where?" "Tree line. North, heard a car after." Padre set down the glass he had been holding. He looked at the child for a long moment, and something moved behind his eyes that none of the younger men could read. Then he turned his head a half-inch. "Get Mecca," he said. A prospect bolted for the back. Del stood holding the baby in the dead center of the room, while 24 people watched, and the strangest thing happened. The fear in his hands stopped. The child had wrapped one impossibly small fist around his thumb and would not let go, and Del understood with total clarity that he would burn the building to the ground before he let anything reach that yellow blanket. Mecca came out from the back, wiping her hands on a rag. She was the bar's cook, 51, silver hair scraped into a knot, and she had raised 4 of her own and buried a husband, and did not frighten at anything. She took one look and crossed the room fast. "Give her here," she said, and her hands were already out. and Dell realized he did not even know the child was a her until that second. "Is it—" he started. "It's a girl," Mecca said. "Maybe 4 months. Look at the fontanelle. The soft spot's fine. She's not in distress." She had the blanket open and was running practiced hands over small arms, small legs, the round belly. "No fever. She's dry. Somebody fed her not long ago." She lifted the baby against her shoulder, and the child settled there like she had been poured. "Where's the bag?" The bag. Dell had left it in the lot. He went back out fast and brought it in. A cheap, soft-sided thing with the broken zipper pull, and Mecca went through it on the bar while everyone watched. 3 clean diapers, a half can of formula, 1 change of clothes, washed thin, a pacifier on a clip, and folded at the very bottom under everything, a single sheet of lined paper. Mecca read it without expression, then handed it to Padre. Padre read it twice. He set it flat on the table and pressed it with 2 fingers as if it might try to leave. "Her name is Wren," Padre said to the room. "The mother's name is on here, too. She says she'll be back. She says she's sorry. She says she had nowhere else and no time. And she's begging whoever finds this not to call anyone official. That calling anyone official is exactly what gets the baby taken." He paused. She underlined the last part 3 times. The cold did not need explaining to anyone in that room. Half the people there had grown up learning the hard way that a uniform at the door was never the cavalry. They knew what a county did to a young woman with no money and a baby, and no one to vouch for her. They had watched it happen to sisters and cousins and themselves. "So we don't call anyone," Dell said. Padre looked at him a long time. "We don't call anyone yet," he said. "We find out what she's running from first. Then we decide what calling anyone would even do." He stood finally, and the standing was slow and deliberate, and when he was up, the whole room came up an inch with him. "Hour from now, I want to know who she is, who's chasing her, and how scared we actually need to be." Wheels. Tobias. The office. The rest of you, eyes on the road, both directions. He looked at Mecca and the child. Back room, quiet, warm. He looked last at Dell. You don't put her down." "I wasn't going to," Dell said. What happened in the next hour was not what any of them expected, and it began with a younger member named Tobias and a laptop on the office desk in the back of the Ace High. Tobias Vance was 28, and the only man in the charter who had finished 2 years of community college before the engine of his life threw a rod. He was lean and quiet, with a scar splitting one eyebrow and quick brown eyes, and where the others read roads and weather, he read records. The note had a name on it. Padre laid it on the desk beside him and tapped it once and said one word, "Find her," and went back out to the floor. The name on the note was Carrie Menza. Tobias did not type it into anything that would leave a trail. He worked the way he always worked, sideways, through the public seams of the world, the county property rolls and the court calendar, and the cheap places people land when they have run out of other places. He started with the court calendar because court calendars are public and indifferent and do not ask who is reading them. It took him 11 minutes to learn that a Carrie Menza had filed something at the county courthouse 2 counties east, and another 6 to learn what it was. It was a request for a protective order. It had been denied. He sat back and read the denial twice, slowly, the scar through his eyebrow drawing tight, the way it did when something did not add up. The denial was fast. Too fast. Protective orders against strangers got hearings. Protective orders that died inside a day died because someone wanted them to. He went out and found Padre and told him in a low voice, and Padre's jaw set in a way the club had learned to be afraid of on other people's behalf. The order had been filed against a man named Royce Tilden, and Royce Tilden, Tobias said, was not nobody. Royce Tilden owned half the storage and a third of the strip mall and a seat on the county's Economic Development Board, and his cousin sat on the bench 2 counties east, and the protective order Carrie Menza had begged for had been denied by that same court in under a day with a single line about insufficient evidence. Royce Tilden was the baby's father. And 4 days ago, Carrie Menza had taken the baby and disappeared, and Royce Tilden had reported the child abducted by an unstable mother and had a lawyer and a sympathetic judge and a story already built. "He's not chasing her with his hands," Tobias said. "He's chasing her with the whole machine. Sheriff out there's already got her photo. He files it as a parental abduction, and the next badge that finds her takes Wren and hands her straight to him." Dell stood in the doorway with the baby on his chest and felt the cold of it move down into his stomach. He understood now why Carrie Menza had run toward the most dangerous-looking man in the lot. She had not been handing her child to a stranger. She had been hiding her child behind the one wall the machine could not see through. A clubhouse keeps no records. A man like Dell answers no subpoena. He does not feel like answering. She had done the math of a desperate person and chosen the only door the law could not open. Padre took the note back from the desk and read the underlined part again. "Don't call anyone official." He folded it once and put it inside his cut, over his heart, where the club kept things that mattered. "Where is she now?" Padre said. "I don't know," Tobias said. "She ran on foot into the trees. There's nothing back there but the old rail cut and 3 miles of nothing, and then the river road." "She's coming back," Dell said. They both looked at him. "The note says she'll be back. She didn't leave her kid to be rid of her. She left her kid to keep her alive. She'll come back the second she thinks it's safe, and if Tilden's got the roads, she can't. And she's out there in the cold right now, watching this building to see if a cruiser shows up." The room was quiet. Outside, the wind moved through the lot and rang faintly off the chrome. "Then we make sure no cruiser shows up," Padre said, "and we make sure she can see that." The next part of the hour belonged to the road. Padre sent riders out in pairs, not to chase, but to watch. 2 to the county line east, where any cruiser coming for Carrie Menza would have to cross. 2 to the river road, slow, headlights off where they could manage it, looking for a woman in a thin gray coat. 1 up to the old rail cut, on foot. He did not send them armed, for trouble. He sent them as a perimeter, a quiet ring of eyes around a frightened woman who did not yet know she had any friends in the world. The riders went out the way the club did everything that mattered, without ceremony. Sparrow and a broad man called Tuck took the river road, rolling the throttle down to a crawl so the pipes muttered instead of roared, killing their headlights on the long straight stretches where the moon gave them enough. They were not looking for trouble. They were looking for a gray coat in a ditch, a pale face at a fence line, any small wrong shape in the dark. That might be a frightened woman deciding whether the building behind her was a trap. A pair of younger men, Reyes and the Prospect, took the county line east and parked their bikes nose out at the crossroads where the asphalt changed counties, where any cruiser coming for Carrie Menza would have to slow for the bad seam in the road. And they sat there in the cold, smoking and watching and saying nothing. And 2 ordinary-looking men who were in fact a tripwire. Hollis went up to the old rail cut on foot because a bike could not go there, and because Hollis could move through brush at night more quietly than any man his size had a right to. Padre had not armed them for a war. He had built a ring, a quiet circle of patient eyes around a woman who did not yet know that anyone in the whole turning world was on her side. And the building at the center of that ring kept no records and answered no door it did not choose to. Inside, Mecca had the back room warm. She had found the wood stove gone low and fed it 2 split logs from the stack by the door and worked the damper until the fire took with a soft roar, and the small room with its single bare bulb and its cot and smell of old coffee became in the space of a few minutes the warmest and safest room in the county. She had warmed an ounce of the formula in a pan of water on the bar's hot plate, swirled it, tested it on the inside of her wrist the way she had tested 100 bottles across 30 years. And now Wren was taking it in Dell's arms because Mecca had decided with the authority of a woman who had done this 1,000 times that the big man would hold the bottle. "You dropped your shoulder," she told him. "Bring it up there. She's not glass, she's a person. Let her feel you're solid." And Dell, who had never been told he was solid in a way that meant safe rather than dangerous, brought his shoulder up and held the bottle and watched the baby's eyes go heavy and felt something in 19 years of armor come quietly unbolted. He had spent his whole adult life being the thing other men crossed the street to avoid. Mothers had pulled children closer when his shadow fell over a sidewalk. He had made a kind of peace with it, the way you make peace with weather, and somewhere along the way he had stopped expecting to be anything else to anyone. Now a 4-month-old who could not focus past a foot in front of her face had looked up at 400 pounds of denim and ink and decided with no evidence at all that he was the safest place in the world. And the strange, unbearable thing was that she was right, and that he would spend whatever was left of his life proving her right. That was when the first wrong thing happened. A set of headlights swung into the gravel lot too fast, throwing light across the front windows. Not a bike, a car. The men at the front came up off their stools. Through the dusty glass, they watched a dark sedan roll to a hard stop, and a man get out of it. And the man was wrong for the place in every way that mattered. He wore a pressed jacket and clean shoes, and he stood in the lot, looking at the row of bikes the way a man looks at a problem he intends to bill someone for. He was not Royce Tilden. He was something Tilden had bought. His name, they would learn, was Garrett Sewell, and he carried a license that let him find people for money, and a manner that suggested he had never once been afraid in a place like this. He came through the screen door without knocking the way you knock at a place that is not yours, and he held up a phone with a photograph on it, and he said, into the silence, "Evening. I'm looking for a woman. She'd have a baby with her." Nobody moved. The jukebox had gone quiet between songs and did not start another. "I'm authorized to recover a missing child," Sewell said, and he said authorized like a man laying down a winning card. "Court, order, parental, rights, the works. The mother's unstable, took the kid 4 days ago. I've tracked her to this road. You help me, there's no trouble for anybody. You don't, and you're sheltering an abductor, and that's a problem for the whole." He gestured loosely at the room, the cuts, the patches, the whole operation here. From the back, slow, Padre came out. He did not hurry. He let Sewell watch him, cross the whole length of the floor, all of it, the heavy boots and the gray beard and the years. And the closer he got, the smaller the lot's brave investigator became, though Sewell kept his chin up out of pure professional habit. Padre stopped a comfortable arm's length away and looked at the phone, at the photograph of a tired young woman, for exactly as long as it took to memorize it. "No baby here," Padre said. "You sure about that?" "I'm sure about everything that happens in this building," Padre said. "It's the one thing I'm sure about." Sewell smiled the smile of a man who has a second card. I can have a sheriff's deputy here in 20 minutes. You can, Padre agreed. Out here. That deputy's named Pruitt, and he owes the bar $1,100 on a tab and a busted window from his nephew's bachelor party. And the last time he came out for a complaint, he stayed for 3 beers and apologized. So you call him. But here's what you're going to think about while you wait. Padre took one step closer, and now there was no daylight left in the space between them at all. You came in here and told a room full of strangers. You're hunting a woman and a baby. You said it loud. Everybody heard it. Now, if anything happens to that woman anywhere, ever, every man in this room knows your name and your face, and the plate on that car. That's not a threat. I don't make those. That's just arithmetic. You walked in and did the addition yourself. Garrett Soule's professional manner held for exactly 3 more seconds. Then something behind his eyes did the math Padre had described and did not like the total, and he took a step back toward the door he had been so bold coming through. I'll be in touch, he said to no one. No, Padre said, you won't. The sedan backed out fast and through gravel and was gone up the county road, and the room let out a breath all at once. Padre did not relax, though, and because he did not, no one did. He turned to Tobias. He didn't track her here, he said. Nobody tracks a woman on foot through a rail cut at night. He came here because somebody told him to. Somebody knows she's near this road. He looked at Dell. Which means she's near this road. And so is the next one, Tilden sends, and he won't send a talker next time, he'll send a badge. We don't have an hour, we have what's left of one. The clock on the wall said it had been 38 minutes since the diaper bag hit the asphalt. What Tobias did next was the thing the club would talk about for years, and there was not a drop of violence in it. He did not need to break into anything. Royce Tilden was a man who lived in public, a man who put his face on storage unit billboards and his name on a development board agenda that was posted by law on a county website for anyone to read. And Tobias had been reading public seams his whole life. He pulled the board's meeting minutes, the ones nobody is meant to actually open, and there in the dry record of a rezoning vote 8 months back was Royce Tilden's name beside a parcel, and beside that parcel, a company. And the company led to a second company, and the second company had filed a lien against a third, and somewhere. In that paper chain, Tilden had signed his name to a number that did not match the number he had sworn to the county he was spending. It was not a secret. It was just buried in plain sight, the way the worst things always are, waiting for one patient person to lay 2 public documents side by side. He cooked the books on the strip mall expansion, Tobias said quietly. Took the development, grant for affordable units, built none, moved the money. It's all on the county's own website. Anybody could find it. Nobody ever looks. He turned the laptop so Padre could see. He's not untouchable. He's just never been looked at by somebody who wasn't on his side. Padre studied the screen. He was not a man who used computers, but he understood leverage the way other men understood weather. This goes to the state, he said, not the county. The county's his, the state's got an office for exactly this, and they'd love a clean file handed to them with a bow on it. He straightened, but not from us. The day a motorcycle club mails a complaint about a county big shot is the day it goes in the trash. With our name on it, it has to come from her, from Carrie, with a lawyer who isn't from out there. She can't afford a lawyer, Tobias said. That's the whole reason the protective order died. She showed up alone. She's not alone anymore, Padre said. And that was the moment the hour turned. And it turned not on a fist or an engine, but on a sentence. The same sentence the club had built its whole life around without ever writing it down. She's not alone anymore. Dell in the doorway, holding a sleeping child against a chest that had carried nothing soft in 2 decades, felt the words go through him like heat through cold hands. The front door opened. Everyone turned, braced for the badge Padre had promised was coming. It was not the badge. It was one of the riders he had sent to the river road, a wiry man called Sparrow. And behind Sparrow, half-carried, soaked to the knees and shaking so hard her teeth knocked, was a young woman in a thin gray coat. Carrie Mensa got 3 steps into the warmth of the room, saw the yellow blanket in the giant stranger's arms, saw her daughter sleeping and pink and safe, and her legs simply stopped working. Sparrow caught her. Mecca was already moving. They got her into a chair by the wood stove, and Mecca wrapped a blanket around her and pressed a mug of coffee into hands that could not hold it, and Carrie did not reach for the baby. Not yet, because she was crying too hard to trust her arms, and she kept saying the same thing over and over. "You didn't call them. You didn't call them. You didn't call them. We didn't call them," Padre said. He crouched down in front of her chair, so that for once in his life he was looking up at someone, an old lion folding himself small. And he said it again so she would believe it. "Nobody called anybody. She never left that man's arms. Look at her. She slept through the whole thing." Carrie looked. Wren slept on, one fist still curled. A thread of formula dried at the corner of her mouth, utterly unbothered by a world that had spent 4 days trying to take her. A sound came out of Carrie that was half laugh and half something with no name, and she finally let Mecca lift the baby and lay her in her arms, and she folded over her daughter and shook. They let her cry. Bikers are not good at words, and they know it, so they did the thing they are good at instead. Sparrow built up the stove. Mecca warmed soup. A man named Hollis, who never spoke, took off his own cut and laid it over Carrie's shoulders without a word, which in that room was the loudest thing anyone could have said. And Dell stood close, not too close. The way you stand near someone you have decided is yours to protect, before they have any idea they have been decided about. When she could talk, the story came out in pieces, and none of it was new to anyone there, which was the worst part. She had met Royce Tilden when she waited tables at a place he owned, a corner steakhouse with cloth napkins and a wine list, the kind of place where a man like Tilden held court in the same booth 3 nights a week. He had been charming, the way money is charming, which is to say generously and on his own terms. He had tipped enormous, and learned her name and made her feel for a while like the floor under her had finally stopped tilting. He had been charming until the day she was pregnant, and then he had been something else, cold in a way she had no word for, until she lived inside it. A man who began to talk about her child the way he talked about a parcel of land, an asset, a thing with his name attached. When she finally took the baby and left in the dark with one bag, he had not come after her crying or begging. He had not wanted Wren. He had wanted to win because men like Tilden do not lose things. They repossess them, and the loss of a thing he considered his was an insult that money existed precisely to correct. The protective order had died in his cousin's court in a single afternoon, dismissed for insufficient evidence by a judge who had not looked her in the eye. The abduction story had been planted with the sheriff's office before she even knew she needed to run. She had been sleeping in her car for 4 nights, a 15-year-old hatchback with a cracked windshield, moving every few hours, parking behind closed gas stations and in the lots of all-night laundromats, rationing the formula, counting the diapers. And tonight, coming through Harlan Cross, she had seen a sheriff's cruiser idling at the edge of town with its lights off and a man inside it talking on a radio. And she had known with the total animal certainty of a hunted thing that if she was in that car when they pinned it, she would never hold her daughter again. So she had driven past the cruiser slow and careful, hands at 10 and 2, and at the next bend she had seen the roadhouse, the loudest and roughest and most lawless-looking place on the whole dark map, the one building in the county a deputy would need a reason and a warrant and a great deal of nerve to enter. And she had pulled in with her heart slamming and picked out the biggest man in the lot, and she had handed him everything she had in the world and prayed to a God she was not sure she still believed in. "I didn't know you," she said to Dell, looking up ashamed. "I just thought he looks like nobody could make him do anything." "Do anything he didn't want to do, ma'am," Dell said, and his voice came out rougher than he meant it. "You thought right." Padre let the warmth of the room hold for a moment longer. Then he pulled a chair around and sat in front of her, and he laid it all out plain, the way he laid out everything. He told her what Tobias had found, the grant, the money, the public record sitting there for anyone with the patience to read it. He told her it was hers to use, not the club's, that it had to come from her with a real lawyer, or it would die, the way the protective order had died. And he told her the club knew a lawyer, 2 counties the other direction, a woman who had once helped a member's daughter and owed nobody in Tilden's world a single favor, and that the call would be made tonight, and that the gas to get there and the roof until then were not things she would ever be asked to pay for. "Why," Carrie said, "you don't know me." Padre was quiet a moment. "A long time ago," he said, "somebody handed me to a stranger, too. Different shape. Same night." He stood, his knees telling the whole room about the standing. "We pay it where we can. That's the only law we keep that's worth keeping." The hour was nearly gone. And the thing about that hour, the thing the title of the story promised and the night delivered, was that nothing in it was the thing a person expects from a row of bikes outside a roadhouse. No one threw a punch, no weapon left a holster. The most dangerous men in the county fought the most powerful man in the county, with a warm stove, a borrowed cut, a can of formula tested on a wrist, and 2 pages of his own public record laid side by side. The violence Royce Tilden had counted on never came, and that was precisely how he lost, because he had built his whole life for a fight in a language these men had simply refused to speak. The lawyer's name was Adrienne Okafor, and she answered on the 4th ring, even though it was late, because Padre's was a number she had promised long ago to always answer. She listened for 6 minutes without interrupting. Then she said 3 things. She said, "Do not let that young woman sign anything or talk to any deputy without me." She said, "Photograph every page of the bag, the note, the dates, the cruiser. If it comes back—" And she said the State Inspector General's office had been looking for a reason to open Royce Tilden's development grants for 2 years, and could not get a complainant brave enough to put a name on it, and that a mother fighting for her child with a clean paper trail was the most sympathetic complainant in the world, and that by this time next week, Royce Tilden would have stopped being a man who hunted Carrie Mensa and started being a man hunting his own lawyer's phone number. When Padre hung up, he looked at Carrie for a long moment. "You're not going to be running anymore," he said. It was not a comfort. It was a fact, stated the way. He stated facts, and somehow that made it land harder than any comfort could have. The badge Padre had promised did come, eventually, just not the way Sewell had threatened. Near the end, headlights crossed the front windows again, slower this time, and a county cruiser eased into the lot and sat there with its engine running, and inside the car a heavy middle-aged deputy looked at the row of bikes and visibly did some arithmetic of his own. This was Pruitt. He did not get out for a long minute. When he finally did, he came to the screen door, but not through it, and he stood there, turning his hat in his hands, and he said he'd had a call about a possible custody situation and was just, checking. No trouble. Padre met him at the door and did not invite him in. "There's no situation here, Lloyd," Padre said. "There's a woman having a hard night and some folks looking after her. You want to make it a situation. You'll be making it against a complainant. The state IG is going to be very interested in keeping healthy and happy on account of what she's about to hand them about your friend Tilden. You want to be standing next to Tilden when that lands, or you want to have been the deputy who checked, found nothing, and went home." Pruitt thought about it. He was not a brave man, and he was not exactly a good one, but he was not a fool, and the math Padre had handed him was very simple. "Found nothing," he said. Going home, he put his hat back on. He hesitated, then added, quieter, "Tilden's been leaning on this department a long time. Be nice to see him lean the other way for once." Then he was back in his cruiser, and then he was gone, and the lot was just bikes and chrome and quiet again. It was by the clock on the wall, exactly 1 hour and 4 minutes since a diaper bag had hit the asphalt. The whole storm had come and broken and passed in the time it takes to change a tire and tell a story. And at the center of it, the baby named Wren slept on, having missed all of it, which was the entire point. The weeks after were not part of that hour, but they were paid for inside it. Adrienne Okafor drove out 2 days later and sat with Carrie at the long, scarred table and built the file the way you build a wall, one verified document at a time. The state opened its inquiry within the month. Royce Tilden's lawyer stopped returning the development board's calls. The cousin on the bench, suddenly aware of how a denied protective order looks when a state investigator is reading it backward, found reasons to recuse. The abduction claim evaporated the instant a real court, 2 counties in the right direction, looked at a mother who had a lawyer, a paper trail, and a clean medical record on a healthy, well-fed child. Tilden did not go to prison, not that year. He was stripped of the board seat all the same, the grants were clawed back, the billboards came down one by one, and the man who had built his whole life out of never being looked at spent the rest of it being looked at very closely indeed. The armor came off in public, piece by piece, and underneath it there had never been anything but a frightened man who had only ever been strong against people he was sure could not fight back. Carrie did not leave Harlan Cross. She got a job at the diner across from the Ace High and a small apartment over it, and she paid her own way because she insisted on it, and the club let her because letting her was the respect she'd earned. Still, she brought Wren to the roadhouse on slow afternoons, and the baby who had slept through her own rescue grew up, knowing the smell of leather and engine oil as the smell of safety, learning to walk by hauling herself up on a leg of the long scarred table, falling asleep against a borrowed cut more nights than not. The men who could not say a soft word to save their lives competed silently over who got to hold her. Hollis, who never spoke, taught her to wave. And Del Brunner, who had carried wounded men and stood at 6 funerals and never once held something so small, became the thing he had not known he could be, which was not a danger to anyone in the world but one very small person's idea of the safest place in it. Padre watched it all from the head of the table, and he never said what it meant, because saying it would have made it smaller. He just kept the note. He carried it in his cut over his heart the rest of his days, folded soft at the creases, the underlined lines still dark. "Don't call anyone official," he had honored it to the letter. He had simply understood, the way the desperate understand and the powerful never do, that the woman who wrote it had not been afraid of help. She had only been afraid of the kind of help that came with a uniform and a form and a man like Tilden's hand somewhere up the chain. The other kind, the kind that came in leather and asked nothing and called no one, that kind, she had been searching for her whole life without knowing it had a roadhouse and a stove and a name. On the night of the day Tilden's last billboard came down, Carrie stood behind the diner counter and watched the row of bikes across the road catch the last of the light chrome going gold, and then orange, and then dark, and she held her daughter on her hip and felt, for the first time and longer than she could remember, no urge at all to run. The county road ran north into the trees the same as it always had. She just didn't need it anymore. Wren reached for the window and laughed at nothing, at the lights, at the night, at the simple fact of being warm and held and unafraid. And somewhere across the road an engine turned over and settled into an idle low and steady, the sound she would always after this hear as the sound of being kept. If this story warmed something in you, if you have ever been the one who ran or the one who caught, stay a moment and let that feeling sit. And if it moved, you leave a word below and pass it on to someone who needs to know that the roughest-looking door is sometimes the only one that opens